Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory and honor to Yahweh Bashem El Shai, Bashem Akakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth and citations to the sincere Akim and Akwath in your listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of always wanted to discuss this topic. I'm sorry. It's an article that came out in regards to an 8-year-old that got shot by a stray bullet while in bed, right? So it's a story that's been happening in Toronto, and I kind of want to touch on this to show you the essentially the importance of those curses never ever went away. They're still in full effect, right? And our people, this is the consequence of us straying away from the way that the Lord intended us to actually be, right? So I want to read a little bit of the article here and kind of give some commentary, and Lord's will that this lesson may be edifying, right? So I'm just reading off of aptnnews.ca. So this is an 8-year-old Toronto boy killed by a stray bullet while he was in bed with his family is being remembered as a compassionate and fearless child, and community prepares to hold a vigil in his memory later this week. And it says Javai Roy is being buried in Wikwem Mekong First Nation in Manitoulin Island, where traditional ceremonies will be held in honor of the boy's Ojibwe Jamaican heritage, right? So I'm guessing, he's definitely, an Israelite, right? I believe his mother is Native American, and maybe the father might be so-called Jamaican, right? But the point is, this is the consequence of what happens to our sons, our children, because we strayed away from the Lord, right? And as a matter of fact, I guess I'll just start off with the curses. Just bear with me. Let me just open up a new tab here, right? Because, children are really and truly a blessing, right? But you see the consequences thereof when we don't adhere to the ways that the Lord intended us to actually, be, right? Because Jacob is a plain man dwelling in tents, and that word plain refers to an individual who's supposed to be upright, right? So let me go to the curses and go from there. This is Deuteronomy 28. I'll start at verse 15, then I'll jump down. And it says, "And shall come to pass, when thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord Yahweh thy power, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed thou shalt be in the city, and cursed thou shalt be in the field." This is the condition that we're in as a people. And wherever we are, we're in the city. So Toronto is a city, and we're cursed in those places, right? And they follow you. And people think that acquiring physical substance is able to deflect from a spiritual problem. You're spiritual bankrupt, right? And it's impossible for you to use carnal measures to mend or repair a spiritual problem, right? So let me jump down here in regards to the children. This is verse where was it? Hold on. Okay, this is verse 41, and it says, "Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity," right? So it shows you the consequences thereof. We're in a situation, our people don't seem to understand that it not only affects you, but it affects the children also. because we messed up, right? And this is the biggest part of the issue our people don't seem to fully understand, or even they don't want to accept this, right? Because accepting it also comes with actually trying to change and put off you know um, dead culture, dead ways, dead works that doesn't actually profit you anything good, anything righteous, right? And that requires them to admit their faults, and they don't want to do that, right? So I want to go back to the article here. I'm just going to jump around, but it says um, Wilson described Javai as genuinely good, happy, compassionate, kind, curious child who always made sure to look after his mom and his two siblings. So, from reading it, it doesn't seem like there was any sort of father in the household, right? And one of the things when you go through different accounts in the scriptures, the father is very, very important in the development in a child's life, especially in a son, right? Because you give them tenets, you give them wisdom, guidance, precepts, understanding to be able to walk, in a way after the father passes. The scriptures say that though he may die, it is as though he was not dead, because he's essentially made a duplicate of himself, right? And who knows what sort of individual he was actually looking around to see that, because a child like that can see what's it called, they can see a template of wickedness, of a male figure in wickedness, or they can see a template in a male figure in righteousness. They can see either one of the two, and majority of the time it's a template of wickedness, whether it might be on TV, whether it might be in the house, whether it might be in the music, wherever they might see them, they're still going to see a template of a man around. And this is the importance of coming back to the Lord, right? To be able to give you guidance and understanding. A good example of that was that King David, right? When he was giving his charge to Solomon, one of the things he said, okay, show yourself a man and remember these precepts, remember this understanding, right? Let me just get that just for edification. Hold on. What's that? First Kings. This is First Kings 2, verse 1, and it says, "Now the days of David drew nigh, that he should die, and charged." So we're going to go into that word charge. It refers to essentially a responsibility. It refers to a duty. And this is one of the common things that our young men don't have, right? Kind of speaking more specifically about the boys, right? Because you see they either are playing out as the gangster, or they're playing out as sodomites, right? Brothers who don't know, if you've probably seen different videos and clips of our men dressing up in red dresses, makeup, that kind of thing, right? When you see that, it's you realize that how important wisdom is, because then they know a child that is being brought up in righteousness knows to stay away from those kinds of lifestyles, because the scriptures say that the wages of sin is death, right? So this is verse 2. So the point was, a charge is essentially a command, a responsibility, a duty, right? He charged Solomon his son, saying, "I go the way of all the earth. Now be thou strong therefore, and show thyself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord thy power, and walk in his ways, and keep his statutes and commandments and judgments and testimonies, which is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper." So it's about having your ways to prosper, right? In all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turneth himself, right? So this is his is like his is, I guess you can call it like a farewell speech before David passes, right? But he essentially is making a duplicate of himself, and this is the one of the things our people, they do that in a negative sense, whether they might have, they come from a decent family, so on and so forth. They lack the spiritual understanding, the spiritual wealth of how to actually navigate through different situations, right? Essentially, what you see now is different examples of how a lot of these young men get killed off, right? They're in the gangster life, they're in the sodomite life, they're in, you know, or they might be in the career corporate, so-called corporate life, right? It just all, it doesn't, they don't have an understanding of how to actually please the Lord being in any of those lifestyles, right? So um let me go, there was something I wanted to read. Okay, this is Baruch chapter 4 verse 1 in regards to the commands. This is it says, this is the book of the commandments of the Most High, of the law that endureth forever. All they that keep it shall come to life, but such as leave it shall die. Turn thee, O Jacob, and take hold of it, and walk in the presence of the light thereof, that thou mayest be illuminated. And there's nothing wrong with being illuminated in righteousness, in on the right hand side, right? That's how you get understanding, right? The scriptures say that she prevented them that desire her, right? This is the importance also of wisdom, because you're being prevented from certain situations, right? We don't know the type of things that this boy did, whether it might be in this life or the past life, right? We don't know the types of things that he was involved in, right? That's another thing. They also present a lot of these children. They present these children as, he was a good boy. He was doing this and we do that and so on and so forth. Like, we don't know, what that boy did, right? But the point is really, our people don't understand the importance of wisdom, right? Which starts with a fear of the Lord, right? This is I'm gonna jump down to verse 6, and it says, "You were sold to the nations, not for your destruction, but because you moved Yahweh Bashar to wrath, and ye were delivered to your enemies, and ye have provoked him that made you by sacrificing unto devils and not unto the Most High." Right? So all these different practices our people engage in, that hedge of protection that was around you is no longer there anymore. So now the Lord pretty much put it in the spirit of these spirits created for vengeance and these other nations to essentially punish us because we're stopped behaving and conducting in the ways that we should behave in, right? And this is something, a sentiment that is constantly echoed, by our apostles and elders, and on down, to get out of those abominable ways that actually don't bring forth any life. All these things that they do, you're essentially burning incense onto vanity, right? Because it doesn't profit you anything, right? Vanity is something that is empty. There's nothing substantial about it. Let's go to, what's that, Jeremiah 18. This is Jeremiah 18, verse 15, and it says, "Because my people have forgotten me, they have burned incense unto vanity. They have caused them to stumble in the ways of the ancient paths, and walk in the paths in a way not cast up, to make their land desolate and perpetual hissing. Everyone that passeth by shall be astonished and wag his head. I will scatter them as with an east wind before the enemy, and I will show them the back and not the face in the day of their calamity. Then said they, Come and let us devise devices against Jeremiah." Right? So they have a mindset. They dislike what the prophets are saying. It's not words. They want smooth things. They want to be prophesied deceits, lies, comforts, right? This is continuing on in verse 18, and it says, "For the law shall perish from the priest, and not nor counsel from the wise, nor the word from the prophet. Come, let us smite him with the tongue, and let us not give heed to any of his words." Right. So it shows you the prophets always give understanding of what happens when you err from the ways, right? And it's not like, and you have camps in Toronto. You have camps all over the world giving understanding into why our people are in this position, but our people, it's not they rather take the opportunity to essentially mock the prophets rather than actually hearken unto the prophets. The scriptures say that the poor man's wisdom is despised, because we look, we're not very well, I don't want to say well spoken, but we might stumble, stutter some couple words, patchy beards. We don't look the part, clean cut like a lot of pastors in the churches. So our wisdom of what we're saying is actually being despised. But this is the end result thereof, because you didn't hearken unto the Lord's message. This is the end result. So, you know, yeah, it can't, you know, it's unfortunate, because you want to see your son. You don't want to see your as a man, you want to have your sons grow up and to actually actually grow up, hearken and rule. But this is, but as Jeremiah said, pray not for these people, right? So because they don't care, right? So I guess I'll just read this last one, because the article did mention he was 8, and I wanted to read this here because it shows you, like, we had kings in our history that actually did the right thing, right, and hearken unto the voice of the Lord. This is 2 Kings chapter 22 verse 1. And it says, Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adiah of Boskath. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. And it came to pass in the 18th year of King Josiah, the king sent Shaphan and the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, the scribe of the house of the Lord, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the priest, and ye may sum the silver which is brought up of the house of the Lord, which the keepers of the door have gathered of the people. And I'm reading this as an example because Josiah was actually one of those kings that actually exemplified righteousness, right? He heard about a lot of the things that a lot of forefathers did, and was like, oh damn, and he was kind of like pricked in his heart, like, yo, let me make some reforms, right? Let me get rid of a lot of these bad ways, these bad idols, practices, and so on and so forth. He kind of, he began a reformation in like a reforming program, right? But he understood that there was a way to conduct yourself, right? And this is a lot of the things that a lot of these children that are being begat in these times, they're just being they're just being numbered to the slaughter, basically, because they didn't hearken unto the voice of the Lord, right? Let me just get that quick example. Of what he did. One second, let me just look for it. Okay, this is 2 Kings 23 and 5. And he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense unto high places in the cities of Judah, in the places round about Jerusalem, them also that burnt incense unto Baal, to the sun and to the moon and to the planets and to the host of heaven, right? So these things, he started getting rid of all these different, idolatrous practices. In verse 7, it says that he broke down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where women wove hangings for a grove, right? Because we're not supposed to be having all these different gods before the Lord, right? The Lord is a jealous power. We're supposed to be, as a man, as Paul said in Corinthians, we're espoused to one husband and chaste. And the word chaste means to be pure. We're not supposed to be contaminated with all these different, practices and philosophies and so on and so forth, right? This is what happens. And then you end result, you begat children, and your children, they follow after those same ways, right? But it shows you that the importance of righteousness here, the importance of being in tune with Yahweh Shem Shai, right? And then the Lord, protects you. He's a hedge of protection rather than working against you. So, that's pretty much it. I kind of just wanted to touch on that, just to show you the importance. The curses are still in very much full effect, but these things will continue to happen because our people essentially don't hearken. They don't listen, right? Very, very stiff-necked people. They want to talk about the gun violence and then that fizzles out for a time. All these different movements and plans that they have, it all fizzles out for a time, right? Like how long, ye simple ones, as the scriptures say, would you love simplicity? And these fools hate knowledge, right? Because his wisdom is crying, she's uttering her voice in the chief place of concourse, but our people don't hearken. But anyways, I'll leave the lesson there. But Lord's will, this was quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Shai, Bashem Makakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us this truth. Until the next time, I say Shalom.